IVM.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. My name is Rohan Seth and we are here today with a very special guest, Anushka Jain from the Internet Freedom Foundation. Anushka is here to talk to us today about facial recognition technologies and I think this is a very interesting time for us to be talking about this. Before we get into the episode itself, I want to introduce IFF a little bit, the Internet Freedom Foundation. They do great work around just keeping digital rights safe in India. And I will link the website in the show notes so you can go and check out some of their work. We'll also try to include a link to the project that ISFN is working on and Anushka is leading on the Panoptic project. Am I right, Anushka?
Yeah, it's called Project Panoptic.
All right, great. So we'll include a link to that. And I want to actually begin by just talking about facial recognition a little bit. Facial recognition sounds like a great technology, and I know I've argued elsewhere in my columns, but today I want to just have this conversation so that we can bring about both sides of the argument. So I'm going to try and play the devil's advocate here. So here it seems like a pretty good technology, Anushka, wouldn't you say? Because we've recently seen a rise in the technology being used in stuff like protests. So I know that in Hong Kong there have been concerns about facial recognition being used to just being able to map protesters. Similarly, we've had cases in India as well where the government and ministers at times have said that, well, facial recognition is something that we can use to basically map our protesters and identify if they're regular at protests and stuff like this. So what thoughts do you have on this?
I think when we talk about facial recognition, we have to think about it in, a manner wherein we understand all the pros and all the cons of it. And then we decide whether the pros are worth the cons that this technology brings with it. So firstly, we need to understand that facial recognition technology is not accurate. We don't have a facial recognition technology system that can detect a face 100% with 100% accuracy. That has not been developed as of yet. So in such a situation, when we don't even know if the facial recognition is going to be accurate, and using facial recognition technology for security or surveillance purposes or even for authentication of identity becomes very problematic. Because what will happen if an inaccurate facial recognition system is used for these purposes, right? So there can be two situations which arise. One can be, there can be a false positive. So in such a situation, what will happen is that the facial recognition technology has identified me as somebody that I am not. So it has given a false positive result and matched me with someone that I'm not. In a situation where the police is using facial recognition technology to identify a suspect, and the facial recognition technology being inaccurate identifies somebody as the suspect. In that situation, the person is then facing charges for a crime that he has not done. And this is because the technology itself is faulty. And we are depending on it knowing that it is faulty. The other situation that can arise is a false negative. What happens in a false negative is that the facial recognition technology does not recognize me as myself. So in a situation where we are using facial recognition technology for access to schemes by the government or for the purposes of voter verification, for example, if the facial recognition technology fails to identify me as myself, then I will not be able to vote. The right to vote is in our constitution and it will be taken away because the government has implemented an inaccurate technology, which is something that we cannot even imagine the harms that it would create. And these harms cannot be undone. Once I have lost the right to vote in that election, I will not be able to vote in that election at least. So that is something that we cannot allow to happen. So I think that is one of the problems that will come with regard to facial recognition technology being implemented, wherein, it's inaccurate. I think the next step, obviously, is that what if we, in a hypothetical situation wherein we get an accurate facial recognition technology, in that situation, even then it is problematic because any such system which is being implemented and we do not have a legal framework to regulate it. We don't have a data protection law in India. We don't have any particular laws with regard to facial recognition technology itself. And the government is implementing it on a large scale. The NCRV is rolling out a project for facial recognition technology. In such a situation where there are no regulations and no check in place for the people who are using facial recognition technology, how do we know that it will not be misused? We cannot ensure that, the facial recognition technology is being used for the purposes that the government is saying that it will be used. For example, what is happening in Delhi is that the Delhi police has acquired facial recognition technology because the Delhi High Court said that in a judgment that you can use facial recognition technology to identify missing children. That is in the judgment. But as you yourself mentioned, facial recognition technology was used in Delhi for protests, for, when the riots happened in February. It was used then as well. And when we filed a right to information request with the Delhi police, it said that facial recognition technology is being used for security purposes. Now, this is a very big function creep. What I mean by function creep is that the technology is being used for a function that is wider than what it was disclosed for and what it was intended to be used for. In such a situation, what is stopping the Delhi police or, the government of India at the central level to just use facial recognition technology to create like a whole back-end profile of every citizen? This will lead to problems such as, for example, if they're using it on protests and you're protesting against the government that is in power. So the government knows who exactly you are, and that will act as a curb on my right to freedom of speech and expression, my right to protest, because I will be fearful that, there can be some backlash that the government can have, enact against me, and I will be powerless in such a situation. So we don't know how facial recognition technology will be used because there's no legal framework for it being used.
Okay, so one thing I want to delve a little bit deeper into is just the debate on accuracy. Do we, and based on your understanding, do we have the adequate infrastructure or just the adequate equipment for us to ensure a reasonable level of accuracy, which is to say, let's say, generally a confidence interval of 95%. Are cameras in general good enough for us in India to be able to ensure a good rate of false positives or a good rate of false negatives? In a sense, a good rate is subjective, but let's say up until a 95%. What's your understanding here? How accurate is facial recognition in India at this point?
So I will, I understand your question. And, having a 95% accuracy rate sounds reasonable. But according to an affidavit that the Delhi police submitted, the accuracy rate of the facial recognition technology that they have right now is 1%. They can't even identify or, differentiate between girls and boys with that facial recognition technology. That is the technology that they have currently.
Oh, 1% accuracy rate.
1% accuracy rate, yes. And in a hypothetical situation wherein we can have a 95% technology, we don't have that right now. We don't know what the NCRB is developing. They keep extending the time, the submission bid for their project. In fact, they just again today extended the timeline for their tender that they have out for a national level facial recognition system. We don't know how it's going to be built to ensure that, accuracy is maintained. And let me tell you, even America or any other country like UK or in the EU, we don't have 95% accuracy. I don't want to use the word 95, but we don't have high accuracy levels. And also in such a situation wherein facial recognition is being used for identification of suspects or for, access to schemes, do you think even we can compromise on that 5%? Because somebody who loses out or somebody who is misidentified will face that exclusion or that bias and that cannot be undone.
Yeah, which brings me to actually my second point. So, because facial data generally is not only personal and sensitive, it's also permanent. Right? It's very hard to change your face. Let's say easier to change your location by just being somewhere else. But when it comes to governing something as sensitive as facial data, what checks and balances would you say are important to have here? Of course, we don't have a data protection law in place, but should an ideal law be in place? In your head, what exactly would be the checks and balances that should be put in place so that this technology can be used effectively?
Frankly, I identify with the international standard wherein, agencies like ACLU and Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, they are calling for a complete ban on facial recognition technology for exactly the point that you said, that facial data is so sensitive that it is not worth having the pros of facial recognition technology because the harm that it will do. You're correct in mentioning that even if they're collecting my data through my cell phone, I can leave my cell phone, I can change my cell phone, I can just switch it off and I can move away, and then I will not be, surveilled. But in a situation where cameras are everywhere and they are actually, recording my face, which I cannot change, then the level of surveillance that would enter into the lives of every individual is just too intrusive for us to allow this to happen. There is no way in which if we allow this to happen, it would not lead to harms which can, be justified by the pros that, the government is saying that we should use for it.
Okay, so generally there's no set of standards that you would suggest because of how high the stakes are. And this sort of brings me to an episode of John Oliver I was seeing, I think a few weeks back, where he talks about Uyghur Muslims in China and how facial recognition was being used to surveil them. So that's a pretty interesting, interesting is not the word, that's a pretty devastating way to just use this technology.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Project Panoptic and how that fits into this.
Yeah, and on the point of John Oliver, he also did a episode on facial recognition technology itself. He also said that the use of facial recognition technology in the way that it is being used should not be allowed because of the harms that facial recognition technology is going to entail. And with regard to the Uyghurs in China, so even in India, there is a part of the population which is marginalized, which is oppressed, and which is, more active in protests. And if such a situation arises wherein people can be identified by their faces, then that population which is already oppressed will also face more harms. With regard to Project Panoptic, we started mapping facial recognition technology in India in January after we saw it being used in December for the protests, right? And what Project Panoptic essentially does is it is mapping all the facial recognition technology systems that are being deployed all over the country. So as I mentioned, the NCRB, the National Crime Records Bureau, has a request for proposals out for acquiring facial recognition technology so that they can create a national database which can be used by police all over the country. But this is not the only project that is ongoing. The Railways has a project ongoing for facial recognition technology. Ministry of Civil Aviation has a project ongoing for facial recognition technology, which we have seen happening in some airports wherein they have started using facial authentication. Other than that, as I mentioned, the Delhi police is separately using facial recognition technology, and this trend is being followed by many police departments across the country, wherein we are currently mapping around 30 projects wherein facial recognition technology is being used all over the country. So what Project Panoptic aims to do is we aim to create a platform wherein we can, collate all this data and show it and, have it accessible to every citizen. Why we're doing this? Because facial recognition technology, which is so intrusive into the privacy of individuals, is being developed and implemented in a shroud of secrecy. Like, most people don't really know what is happening with facial recognition technology, why it is harmful, and what will be the harms that, come from it. But it is being used and people don't know that is happening. So our aim with Project Panoptic is just to increase the transparency around these projects and to hold accountable the stakeholders who are involved in this. So how we're doing this is we've created a platform which has like an interactive map which will show all the projects that are ongoing all over the country. We have collated data such as, which government authority is going to implement the project, when it started, how much money has been spent on it, for what purpose it is going to be used, for what duration of time will the data that is being collected will be stored. We've also tried to, get information from official sources such as documents from the official websites and everything. But again, what we saw was that the information that these authorities have divulged is not enough to give like a whole view of the system that they are implementing. So in that situation, we decided that we're going to file right to information requests for each and every project that we come across. And we have currently filed multiple RTIs with regard to every facial recognition technology system that we've come across. What happens with the right to information request is the government has to respond and give you the information that you've asked for if it does not fall under the exception. And we have come across a lot of information through the right to information request. Like I told you earlier about the Delhi police information, the right to information request, which told us that this is the judgment through which they are justifying their use of facial recognition technology, and this is the purpose for which they are using. We also found out private vendor through which they have acquired facial recognition technology, and I think all this information has to be made public so that people know what is happening, that they are being surveilled, and what steps they can, if any, take. One of the things also on Project Panoptic, one of the main things that we want is also to get the government to agree to place a moratorium on the development and deployment of facial recognition technology. So moratorium means for that period of time they will stop developing it, and during that time they will invite stakeholders and civil society organizations as well as privacy experts to understand how facial recognition technology works, how it will affect the privacy of people, and how we should regulate it. So organizations around the world are calling for bans, but we are currently asking for a moratorium, which is a smaller ask, just so that we can, get a pause on the project, so that at least we get the time to think about it and, do something about it. But we have not received the response from the government for that as well.
All right. So I just have a couple more questions. The first one talks about proportionality. So the Puthaswamy judgment that establishes a fundamental right to privacy,
yeah,
talks about proportionality as a concept. And the funny thing to me here is that I think a few months ago, Nikhil Pava from Medianama put up a post on Twitter talking about how Chayos, out of all people, was using facial recognition technology to basically establish a loyalty program. And a lot of this stuff is actually done for the apparent sake of convenience, right? You have Chayos trying to establish a loyalty program, and you have these airlines trying to basically say that, well, your face is your boarding pass, so you don't, we're going to make life easier for you. And this seems like, to me personally, it seems fairly dystopian, but maybe to other people, it is just amazing, smooth, and seamless transactions that happen just by their faces being there. But in either case, what would you say would be a proportional, let's say, goal to have for my facial data to be collected?
So facial data is extremely sensitive personal information of individuals, right? And in a situation where it is being used, we also have to ensure that the way it is stored and the way it is used is legal, it's safe. We don't have a data protection law in place. We don't know what Chayos is doing with your data. Taking Chayos, or for example, the a Ministry of Civil Aviation, which is implementing the DigiYatra project, through which now facial recognition has come to airports on good faith that they will not do anything to our data, is, in the case of such sensitive personal data, very problematic, and also a very low standard that we are keeping for personal data for the entire country. Sensitive personal data has been, a topic of conversation in the European Union, in America, and all other countries, and it is an ongoing discussion wherein people are ensuring that, personal data is protected. In the absence of a data protection law, such use by, private organizations or even government authorities based on good faith, wherein they said that they will not misuse it and they will ensure that, it is not divulged further or anything, is something that we cannot settle for. Because the data itself is so sensitive and it can be used to target you. And in such a situation where it is leaked or it is hacked or something else happens, what will you do? You can't do anything then because it is out already, right? So in such a situation, what we need to understand with regard to proportionality is whether this convenience that, you have from using facial recognition is worth the harms that you will face if something happens to your sensitive personal data.
All right, great. And one last question that I have is, tech firms say that we need to put the hold on this, and you also talked about a moratorium. We know that I think IBM completely abandoned their project, and Amazon said that they're going to place their project on a hold in the US.
Yeah.
So let's say that the data protection law as it exists, the bill as it exists today, is passed into law in its current form. Do you think that provides adequate protections and safeguards for this technology to be deployed after that, or does the bill still lack in its current form, and does it need to be changed? And in what ways can we make it better to ensure that this technology is deployed in a responsible manner?
So one of the criticisms that IFF has raised with regard to the data protection bill in its current form is the surveillance reform, which needs to be included in the bill. So if you know about the bill, or let me tell you in brief terms what the problem is. Currently in the bill, there is an exception for government authorities with regard to surveillance. So in such a situation,
Section 36, no?
I am sorry, I don't remember the section specifically, but they have an exception for the government authorities. Now, if I'm talking about and if I'm raising the very valid concern of state-sponsored mass surveillance with regard to facial recognition technology, then that concern does not get answered by the data protection bill in its current form, right? And then how can we allow such a technology to be implemented when we know that, the government which is going to use it on a large scale will themselves not be held accountable if any, problem arises or if any bad action happens.
Yeah, true. I mean, I think for something as critical as personal data, I think it's essentially extremely important for the government or any body that's processing our facial data to be treated like a fiduciary and be placed under the same restrictions that other fiduciaries are, if not actually increased restrictions.
Exactly.
Cool. Do you have any final thoughts on facial recognition before we conclude?
I think I've already given you all of my thoughts on facial recognition. I think it is very necessary in India to understand why privacy experts are raising the concerns that they are raising. If you look at internationally, now that Amazon, IBM, Microsoft, everybody has moved away from facial recognition technology in the aftermath of the Black Lives Matter movement, we also need to understand that India, although not in the same situation, is in a similar situation. And we need to understand why what happened in America is also something that could happen in India. So we should learn from their experience and, be cautious about the use of such technology. I think that's my final thought with regard to facial recognition.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Anushka, for this episode. And we hope to have you back again soon to talk about future developments in this area.
Yeah, it was lovely talking to you.
Thanks everyone for listening.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle at TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. So it's been a really fun week this week. We've had a great episode with Anand Nilakantha on Cyrus Says. Anand was one of the writers of Bahubali, and he's done some really fun stuff since that. Ashish Vidyarthi also had a really good episode on his show, Begin the Journey. Please do check that out. You do know Yuddha is back, right? Definitely check it out if you haven't. Yuddha is our show about Indian ancient warfare. It's hosted by Anirudh Kanisetti and Aditya Ramanathan. Really great show. You should check that out for sure. And I forgot. Rishikesh was on the network as well. He was on Absolutely Right with Aditi Surana. Do definitely check that out. With that, hope to see you next week.
Entertainment is like food for the brain. It's a window to culture and a great way to understand the world around us. The internet has changed what it means to be an entertainer, creating new storytellers with millions of fans. It has spawned a new breed, the story-sellers, those behind the scenes creating the business for this ecosystem. They work with brands, platforms and channels who are keen to capitalize on an audience hungrier than ever for more stories. I'm Vineet Kanabar, and I have a ringside view to how stories are told and sold. On my show, I bring you creators, artists, executives and marketers for a freewheeling conversation around the business of entertainment. Tune in to Storytellers and Storysellers for personal stories, analysis and criticism every Thursdays as I talk to the brightest minds telling or selling great stories today.